And now we have our guest joining us, Yurii Ihnat, Chief and Spokesperson of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Welcome, Mr. Yurii.
Good afternoon.
We're glad to see you.
Good afternoon. Greetings to you.
Well, let's start with last night. Ukrainians haven't seen anything like this before. There is a lot of discussion on social media about when the strategic aviation took off. The enemy, large numbers, MiGs, they took off, but at some point, everything was suddenly and unexpectedly canceled. The planes returned to their airfields, and now everyone is talking about what exactly that was all about. Was it a drill, or was an attack called off at the very last moment? Do the Air Forces have any understanding of this situation? What was happening in the airspace that night?
The understanding isn't with the Air Force, but with intelligence as to what exactly happened. I want to say that this isn't anything new, it's just a return to what used to happen before. Previously, the occupiers repeatedly launched their strategic aviation. You also remember the frequent air raid alerts in the Crimea. Because of the takeoff of MiG-31K aircraft, which are carriers of the Kinzhal missile, Ukraine was kept on alert up to 7 times a day, sometimes even more. And this time, it could very well be a rehearsal for a significant strike, one that is likely being carefully planned and orchestrated for the near future. Let's put it that way, to be clear. The reason this is important is because we entered the new year without experiencing the kind of massive enemy strikes that we have seen in previous years, which is unusual and noteworthy. Yes, on New Year's night, we had about 200 drones, and roughly around 100 different types and various means of aerial attack and airborne assault. From every night since January 1st, our country is under attack. So it's quite clear that the enemy is certainly not giving up on their intentions or objectives. As we can see from last night, there were a total of 9 separate strikes in both the Chernihiv and Kharkiv regions. At night, either with Cantors or with detachable guided S-300 missiles. And today, during the day as well, it's likely that these were still rockets from multiple launch rocket systems. Long-range ones that hit critical infrastructure facilities in the Kharkiv region. That's why the enemy does not stop targeting our critical infrastructure and civilian areas, just as they have been doing continuously and relentlessly. And accordingly, such threats of a massive, large-scale combined strike still remain, as both the head of state, the president of Ukraine, and the military leadership have repeatedly mentioned that the enemy could, in these days, at any moment, plan and carry out such a strike somewhere.
If we focus and talk about Shaheds, we remember that almost from the very beginning of 2025, there were discussions and talks that Russia could potentially launch up to 1,000 Shaheds at once, but in the end, that scenario ultimately did not happen. What we see from the Air Force statistics, can we perhaps conclude that the Russians have currently reached the peak of Shahed production, and that the production numbers might potentially vary or fluctuate more or less from now on? Here's
the Air Force statistics for December 25th. During the night attacks, Russia launched 5,207 aerial attack assets. Is this really, as NATO says, the peak of Russia's capabilities today?
Well, you see, everyone counts things differently, as they say. Just like even the Financial Times calculated that for one of the months, the effectiveness of our air defense against ballistic missiles was 6%. Well, it's all relative. 6%. If you count overall, do you include hits in places where there's no Patriot system or not? But if you count interceptions where there's a Patriot, say in the Kyiv region, then the interception rate could be as high as 70%. That's why for air defense against ballistic missiles, you have to distinguish between where we have systems that can intercept them and where we don't. It's the same with Shaheds. I gave that example for missiles, but with Shaheds it's a bit different, because many bloggers in the information space, people started talking about 1,000 Shaheds, and some are even saying 2,000. That's why we started including in our morning reports the means of aerial attack in parentheses, how many drones, and of those, how many are likely Shaheds. Because as of 9 a.m., there's still no way to accurately count the exact number of Shahed-type UAVs. You know, there are Shahed 131s, 136s, and now there are even jet-powered Shahed-type UAVs. In Salam, we put the approximate number of Shaheds in parentheses because besides Shaheds, there are also Talmas, Herbiers, and other types of drones flying. And all of that adds up to the number you just mentioned. So, talking about whether they reach that number or not, they can reach numbers as high as 840. We saw such a record, it seems. The latest one was set for air attack means. But it's important to understand how many of those were actually Shaheds. At that time, it was about 350, so it's probably not that easy, even for Russia, to ramp up production specifically of strike UAVs like Shahed. But at the same time, we are seeing these UAVs being upgraded. They have already undergone many changes from their, so to speak, original state, both in appearance and in equipment. That is, the drones can perform different functions, act as relays, serve as strike UAVs. They can also carry out reconnaissance functions. And just recently, we even saw a drone equipped with a man-pads.
So actually, that's what we wanted to ask about next. How are the Shaheds changing? Not in terms of quantity, but in terms of quality. And indeed, we saw the first photos and videos showing that the Russians have started mounting even portable anti-aircraft missile systems on Shaheds. And most likely, this is specifically for counteraction. Probably not against our mobile fire teams, but rather against Ukrainian aviation, either frontline aircraft or the same fighter jets that are also involved in shooting them down. How did you personally react to this? And how do you see this new element, this feature that has started appearing on the Shaheds? Could you elaborate on your perspective regarding its significance? How widespread is this? Or are these still artificial, experimental things?
As I already said, they've changed a lot. The Shaheds, in terms of development, they've already found both Starlink and SIM cards on them. That is, separate communication channels, different modems, and so on. Plus, add to that countering electronic warfare. Many elements found on the antennas are specifically designed to counter our electronic warfare systems that jam various UAVs. And among other things, these kinds of devices as well. Besides man-pads, previous ones were also found. Drones with an increased warhead, weighing up to 90 kilograms and packed with deadly shrapnel. This is so that even if, for example, this Shahed drone is hit by a helicopter, its explosion in the air would create a cloud of dangerous fragments that could damage aircraft. That's why intelligence is working on all of this. Everyone in the Air Force knows about it, as do all the defense forces working today. This applies to manned aviation and not only that. And man-pads are yet another new challenge. Obviously, this will clearly pose a greater threat specifically to our helicopters than to, for example, fighter jets. And all of this is taken into account. It's clear that the enemy isn't standing still. Well, just like us. After all, we also have our own developments, and we strike the enemy wherever we can.
We thank the Air Defense Forces for this and repelling the attacks. Yurii Ihnat, spokesperson for the Air Force.